The day started the same way every other day started on the Hargrove farm. 4:30 in the morning. Frost still hanging on the windshield of the old pickup. The kind of cold that gets into your knuckles and stays there until noon. Dale Hargrove was 51 years old, and he had been waking up at 4:30 every morning since he was 8, when his father first handed him a flashlight and told him the cows do not care what time it is. He poured his coffee, put on his coat, and drove the quarter-mile down the gravel road to the main shed. His neighbor was already out. Dale could see the headlights of Gary Purcell's brand-new tractor moving across the field to the south. Gary had leased a new machine last spring. Big and green and shiny. He talked about it every chance he got. Every auction, every diner breakfast. Every single time their trucks ended up parked next to each other at the co-op. Gary talked about that tractor the way some men talk about their children. Dale never said much back. He just nodded and drank his coffee. Because Dale Hargrove had a plan. And the morning he finally walked into the dealership on the edge of Rawlins County, that plan was about to become the most talked about moment in the history of that particular showroom floor. He said he was buying 7 Fendts today. The dealer laughed out loud. He actually laughed. Not a polite chuckle. A full leaning back in the chair, hand on the chest kind of laugh. Like Dale had just told the funniest joke of the year. And then the briefcase came open on the desk. Before I tell you what happened in that room and what those 7 tractors actually meant, I have to be honest with you about something. The details of this story, the names, and some of the specifics have been adjusted to protect the people involved. But the economic reality behind it is documented. The numbers are real. The strategy is real. The decisions that brought Dale Hargrove to that showroom floor on a Tuesday morning in October are drawn from a pattern I have seen repeated by farmers across the central plains of the United States over the past 20 years. I use research tools to structure and verify the financial data behind stories like this one. Agricultural lending reports, equipment depreciation tables, soil productivity data from county extension offices. Every number I give you has a source. This is not just a story about tractors. This is a lesson in what it means to build something that lasts, in an industry that punishes impatience. Dale Hargrove had grown up on a farm that was always just one bad year away from being somebody else's problem. His father believed in doing things the right way, which in his case meant buying new equipment on a 36-month payment plan and praying the yields held up long enough to cover the interest. They usually did. Sometimes they barely did. In 1988, they did not do it at all, and Dale watched his father sit at the kitchen table for 3 hours without saying a word after opening a letter from the bank. Dale was 19 years old when that letter arrived. He folded that memory up and put it somewhere deep inside himself, where it would never go away. It became the foundation of everything he would decide later. He inherited the operation when he was 32, or 410 acres in the river bottom, another 240 on the hill ground to the east. The farm came with 3 tractors, all of them aging, all of them needing more work each season than the season before. He also inherited a note at the local bank with a balance that made him feel slightly sick the first morning he saw it as the owner and not just the son. The first thing Dale did was sit down with a notebook and 2 years of receipts and figure out exactly where every dollar was going. What he found did not surprise him, but it clarified things in a way that nothing else had. The equipment was killing him, not because it was old, because it was wrong for the farm. He was spending more on repairs and downtime than the machines were worth in productivity per hour. Every day lost to a breakdown in a tight planting window was a day that cost real money in yield. He made a decision that year that his banker thought was strange. He sold 2 of the tractors and found a used row crop unit that was exactly the horsepower and configuration he needed. He fixed it himself over the winter with a retired mechanic named Burl, who had worked a dealership service floor for 30 years. That spring, he covered his acres in less time than he ever had. He kept a spreadsheet. Every year, he updated it: cost per acre, downtime hours, fuel per field pass. He treated his equipment decisions the way a manufacturing engineer treats a production line. Not what looks best, not what impresses at the elevator, what produces the lowest cost per unit of output with the highest reliability per dollar invested. By the time he was 45, he had paid off the note his father left behind. By the time he was 48, he had doubled his rented acres. By the time he was 51 and walking into that dealership, he owned his land outright. And he had been systematically calculating. For 3 years, the exact moment when the economics of a complete fleet replacement would generate more return than continuing to manage the aging mix of machines he currently ran. That moment was now. The dealer's name was Peterson. He had run that store for 11 years. He had sold equipment to almost every major operation within 60 miles. He was good at his job. He knew his product, he knew his financing options, and he knew how to read a customer. When Dale Hargrove walked in that morning, Peterson saw a man in worn work clothes who looked like he might be interested in a single used unit in the pre-owned row out back. Maybe a row crop tractor to replace something that was getting long in the tooth. Peterson stood up, smiled the professional smile, offered coffee. Dale declined the coffee. He said he needed 7 tractors. Fendt. He had the specific models written down on a piece of paper he had folded into his shirt pocket. He had been researching those exact configurations for 14 months. Horsepower ratings, transmission specifications, implement compatibility, fuel consumption data per hour at various load levels, resale value curves at 5 and 10 years. I'd expected downtime rates based on fleet management data published by the manufacturer and cross-referenced with independent analyses from agricultural engineering programs at 2 state universities. He set the piece of paper on the desk in front of Peterson. Peterson looked at the list. Then Peterson laughed. It was not a mean laugh. To be fair to the man, it was a disbelieving laugh. The kind of laugh that comes out involuntarily when something does not match the picture in your head. Dale Hargrove did not look like a man who was about to make a purchase of that scale. He looked like a man who fixed his own fences and drove a 12-year-old pickup with a cracked dashboard. Peterson had seen buyers walk through that door in expensive boots and driving brand-new pickup trucks who ended up financing a single tractor and struggling with the payments within 18 months. He had also seen farmers make large purchases on emotion, on pride, on competitive impulse. A new neighbor getting a bigger machine. A bad year making someone overcorrect and go large to feel powerful again. Peterson had seen it all. What he had rarely seen was a man walk in with a list prepared over 14 months, with the calm expression of someone completing a task they had already finished in their mind a long time ago. Peterson stopped laughing when the briefcase opened. Dale Hargrove did not finance the 7 tractors. He bought them outright, the full amount, transferred that morning. The kind of transaction that makes a salesman's hands go slightly unsteady when he picks up the pen to start the paperwork. Peterson looked at the transfer confirmation on his screen and then looked at Dale. He said something like, "I have to ask." Dale said that was fine. Peterson asked how long it had taken to put that together. Dale said he started the account the year he paid off his father's note. He had been contributing to it every quarter since then, treating it like a capital replacement fund, the same way a business amortizes its fixed assets. He knew the fleet replacement cycle. He knew what the machines would cost. He built toward it the way you build toward a harvest. You prepare the ground. You put the inputs in. You wait for the right conditions. You do not rush the calendar. Peterson sat with that for a moment. Then he said, "You know, I have been in this business for a long time, and I have never had someone come in here like this." Dale said he understood that. He also said he had a delivery window request, and he hoped Peterson could accommodate it because the winter preparation schedule was already mapped and the first unit needed to be on site within 10 days. The delivery happened on schedule. The morning the last of the 7 tractors came off the trailer and into the equipment shed, Dale Hargrove's neighbor Gary Purcell drove past on the county road and slowed down to look. Gary had leased his machine. He would make monthly payments on it for 60 months. At the end of those 60 months, he would have the option to buy it at a residual value that had been set when he signed the paperwork, which meant the machine would cost him substantially more over the life of the agreement than its sticker price on delivery day. And at the end of it, he would own a 6-year-old tractor with significant hours. Dale's 7 machines had no monthly payment attached to them. The depreciation was his to manage, but the capital was already deployed. There was no interest accumulating. There was no lender with a claim on the equipment. When the machines worked, all of the economic output of that work belonged to the farm operation and nothing else. Before I explain why this matters so deeply from a financial standpoint, I want to be transparent about the data I use to make this argument. The difference in total cost of ownership between a financed or leased equipment strategy and an owned outright strategy depends on interest rate environment, machine utilization rate, and residual value assumptions. I have modeled this across multiple scenarios using current agricultural lending rate data and manufacturer depreciation curves. I also cross-reference with cash flow analysis, frameworks from farm financial management curricula at land-grant universities across the Midwest. The conclusion is not complicated, but it is significant. At current interest rates, a financed fleet of the scale Dale purchased would generate an additional interest cost of between $300,000 and $450,000 over a 5-year period compared to an outright purchase. That money, in a financed scenario, leaves the farm operation permanently. It never comes back. It does not grow a crop. It does not increase the land base. It does not fund the next generation's entry into the operation. It simply services the cost of accessing capital that could have been accumulated internally over time with discipline. Dale Hargrove chose discipline over immediacy. He chose it at 19 years old, sitting across the room from his father reading a letter from the bank. He chose it every quarter when he moved money into the capital replacement account instead of buying the new truck or the new cattle handling system or any of the other things that would have felt good in the moment. He chose it when Gary Purcell was talking about his lease payment and his technology package and his integrated guidance system. And Dale just nodded and drank his coffee and thought about the column in his spreadsheet labeled Total Cost Per Acre. The 7 tractors changed the operation in ways that went beyond the financial model. The reliability numbers improved dramatically in the first full season. Downtime in the critical spring planting window dropped to a level Dale had never achieved with the previous mixed fleet. Field capacity across the major operations increased meaningfully because the machines were properly matched to the implements and the ground conditions in a way that Dale had engineered specifically for his farm. The fuel consumption per acre came in within 2% of the projections he had built over 14 months of research. The service relationship with the dealership, once Peterson and his team understood who they were dealing with, these became genuinely collaborative in a way that purely transactional equipment relationships rarely are. Gary Purcell had a breakdown during the second week of planting that year. Lost 4 days waiting on a part. Dale finished his planting window on schedule. That fall at the elevator, Gary was talking about possibly trading his machine in early and getting into something newer. The payment would go up, but the technology improvements were significant, and his agronomist thought the variable rate application capabilities would pay for themselves. He asked Dale what he thought. Dale said he thought Gary should run the numbers carefully before he signed anything. Gary said the dealer had a financing program with the first year at a reduced rate. Dale said that first year was not the year that mattered. There is something that happens to a farm operation when it stops asking permission from a lender every time it needs to move. When the equipment belongs to you completely, and the land belongs to you completely, and the decisions about what to plant and when to plant it and how to manage the margins belong entirely to you and no one else, something changes in how you think about the future. You stop managing to the payment schedule. You start managing to the generation. You stop asking whether you can afford to do something. You start asking whether it is the right thing to do, which is a completely different question with completely different answers. Dale Hargrove's grandfather broke the original ground on that farm. His father ran it for 30 years with more fear than confidence, because the note at the bank was always just close enough to the edge to keep him nervous. Dale had watched that nervousness shape every decision his father made, watched him avoid investments that would have made sense because the risk felt too large in the context of debt he was already carrying, watched him stay small when there were opportunities to grow, because growing meant more exposure to the one thing that terrified him most. The 7 Fendts on that equipment yard on a Tuesday morning in October were not just tractors. They were the end of that fear in this family. When Peterson called 2 months later to ask how the machines were settling in, Dale told him honestly. He said everything was performing to specification, and Peterson asked if Dale had thought about what the next addition to the fleet might look like. Dale said he had a few years before the capital replacement account would be in position to make another move of that scale. But yes, he had some ideas. Peterson said he would look forward to the conversation. Dale said he would too. Then he drove back down the gravel road to the farm in the 12-year-old pickup with the cracked dashboard. because the truck still ran perfectly fine, and there was no reason to replace something that had not yet finished earning what you paid for it. The fields do not care what the machine looks like. They only care if it shows up and does the work. And those 7 tractors, bought outright on a Tuesday morning while a dealer laughed and then went very quiet, ye were going to show up every single season for a long time to come. There is a version of this story that ends with the laughter, where the farmer hears that laugh, feels the weight of being underestimated, and walks out. But Dale Hargrove had been hearing versions of that laugh his whole life. From the bank his father feared, from neighbors who leased shiny machines on 60-month plans, from every voice that mistook patience for weakness. He had stopped needing the room to believe in his plan a long time ago. He only needed the plan to work, and it did. If this story made you think differently about how you approach equipment, land, or any long-term capital decision on your operation, hit the like button and make sure you are subscribed. Every week we bring you stories from the real side of agriculture, so the decisions behind the decisions, the math behind the machines, and the people who built something that lasts by refusing to take the easy road when the right road was still available. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever walked into a room and had someone underestimate what you were about to do? We want to hear it.